Hey everyone, welcome to Broadband Deployment News. So WISPA has come out and they've sent an open letter to the NTIA. I think it's an open letter. I haven't seen a copy of it. I've seen a story about it, saying that because of the BEAD rules regarding unlicensed spectrum, that they could be wasting over $8 billion in broadband deployments in areas that already have broadband. So I'll be right back and we'll discuss that. Thanks for joining me. Rick Uzzi here with Broadband Deployment News. So I saw this story, and as I mentioned, I didn't see the actual, I didn't see the actual letter. I couldn't find it. I looked for it, but it says, you see here, WISPA says NTIA BEAD rules could lead to $8.6 billion in waste. So this is in Fierce Telecom. So it says here, time's running out for wireless internet service providers, or WISP, to change the government's mind about unlicensed spectrum. With pressure mounting, the CEO of the Wireless Internet Service Providers Association, WISPA, sent a fresh letter to the head of the NTIA, warning its current rules could lead to $8.6 billion in broadband subsidy money being spent on areas that are already covered by fixed wireless access services using unlicensed airwaves. So these would be areas that are receiving over the definition of broadband, the 25 by 3, and but it's being delivered over unlicensed spectrum, not licensed or a combination of unlicensed and licensed spectrum. Back in May 2022, the NTIA announced the rules for the $42.5 billion BEAD program. That's in the Notice of Funding Opportunity, stating that areas covered by services solely relying on unlicensed spectrum would be counted as unserved for the purpose of funding allocation. WISPA pushed back, noting that the rule would impact a large subset of WISP, which have long used unlicensed spectrum as a low-cost, flexible option to reach rural areas. So, yeah, a lot of these smaller wireless internet service providers in these rural areas use unlicensed spectrum. It's much more affordable for them to do that. It allows them to keep the costs down, their cost of delivering the service, and therefore they can have more flexibility with the cost to the consumer. And according to the Notice of Funding Opportunity for BEAD, fixed wireless access service that is using completely unlicensed spectrum is not considered reliable broadband service, which means that for purposes of determining, as it says here, the allocation of which areas are unserved, even if an area has fixed wireless access and it's got well over, let's say it's over 100 meg per, over 100 by 20, so it's not even in the underserved category, then that would still be considered unserved because it's not considered reliable broadband due to the fact that it's unlicensed spectrum. According to the NTIA, the agency's rule is based on concerns that unlicensed spectrum might be subject to congestion or interference, which might cause service to be impeded or cut off entirely over the long term. But in a letter to the NTIA Chief Alan Davidson this week, WISPA CEO David Zumwalt contended that the FCC had no such concerns when it funded unlicensed fixed wireless deployments through both its Connect America Fund and Rural Digital Opportunity Fund programs. Now, of course, we know a lot of mistakes were made with those programs, so this could be one of them, saying that we really shouldn't have funded unlicensed. But I don't know if there's been any evidence to the fact that that was a mistake. As far as that, that's not, as I'm aware, some of the mistakes that were brought up about those other two funds. By deviating from precedent and marking these locations as unserved, he argued the NTIA could end up wasting as much as $8.6 billion in BEAD money trying to run fiber to areas already receiving 25 by 3 megs or 100 by 20 megabit service, so maybe even, again, higher than that. And there are actually, since those two programs, we've had the CBRS, Citizens Band Radio Service has come out, and that spectrum can be licensed or it can be unlicensed. If you get the general unlicensed spectrum, then that's a shared methodology where it's supposed to take care of congestion. There's a spectrum sharing kind of arrangement between the incumbents that have that spectrum, as well as anybody that's purchased licensed spectrum through CBRS, through that spectrum. And then everybody else can use it as unlicensed, and there's a sharing where they're kind of the lowest level of priority. And there is enough spectrum where it should work, if you're in a particular area where there shouldn't be that much congestion. But their concern is that, I guess, if it's unlicensed, that then you can have congestion. And then the other concern would be, do these companies stay in business? there is something to be said for the fact that a lot of these smaller providers, these are going to be the smallest providers maybe that are using unlicensed spectrum, so maybe more likely not to be in business later. I don't know. Maybe that's what part of the argument. The 8.6 billion number stems from analyst calculations that the cost to deploy fiber to each of the 1.92 million locations currently served by unlicensed fixed wireless could be as high as $4,500. Most fiber players have cited a cost per passing of $500 to $1,500, but costs can be significantly higher in remote and rural areas. Fiber Broadband Association Chief Gary Bolton told Fierce in September the cost to cover rural locations can run as high as $4,000. That's certainly true, and really $4,000 could be much higher, depending on how rural the area is. You know, I mean, you see $10,000, $13,000 in some cases for really rural areas, and so when I've looked at the costs per household and some of the money that's been given out, let's say through RDOF, you're seeing $3,000, $4,000 fairly regularly. You see some higher amounts in certain census blocks, and then you see some wireless operators that are in there that are, you know, at $300, $400 per house or per passing. So, you know, you can do it a lot cheaper with fixed wireless. By excluding locations that are already being served by broadband networks using entirely unlicensed spectrum, as much as $8.6 billion of the $41.6 billion that Congress appropriated for BEAD deployment funds, more than 1/5 of the total BEAD funds could be wastefully spent, he wrote. That $8.6 billion could instead be used to fund deployment of fiber broadband networks to truly unserved homes and businesses. He makes a point there. But of course, again, what you've got here is if you've only got one provider there and it's a fixed wireless provider and it's a small fixed wireless provider, you know, how stable is that business, and are there going to be issues with congestion? Well, if it's a small area, there's probably not going to be issues with congestion. And if they, you know, if it's a small area and there's no other competition, we have to assume, because if there's no other competition above 25/3, otherwise it wouldn't be available for funds anyway. So they could be financially healthy, meaning that they could be a small operator in a hard to reach area that is providing that service. And they've got enough customers to keep it going because, again, there's nobody else there to do it. So Zumwalt's last-ditch effort to get the NTIA to change its mind comes as the agency prepares to calculate state BEAD allocations based on new maps from the FCC. The NTIA said it plans to announce those allocations by June 30th. So that is the date that they are still targeting to try to figure that out, and they're going to base that on the newest broadband map that comes out probably sometime in mid-May. In an interview with Fear, Zumwalt said that the heart of the argument is not whether or not to deploy fiber. WISPs already do that. It's whether or not to run fiber all the way to the premise. And if the NTIA is trying to reach as many unserved citizens as possible, fiber to the home won't be the right tool in all locations. And that's true. I mean, I think it's known that not every location is going to be capable of getting fiber. And even an unlicensed fixed wireless provider can get funds if there's no other reliable broadband service as qualified by the NOFO. If that's not available, the state can still choose a subgrantee that would do unlicensed spectrum in that case. So Zumwalt said he's optimistic WISPA will be able to eke out a win. He noted the NTIA has continued to take meetings with not only the association, but also several industry vendors, including Tirana Wireless, Siklu, and Cambium Networks. In those meetings, the vendors were able to demonstrate that not only can unlicensed fixed wireless keep up with the capacity demands, the broadband and speed demands that are coming at us, but that they also have very good interference mitigation capabilities. The NTIA fails to change its mind. Zumwalt said he doesn't think it will constitute an existential threat for WISP, but acknowledged it could change the way they operate. Specifically, he said WISP may look to consolidate so they have more resources to participate in an increasingly complex regulatory landscape and effectively compete for funding. No longer an industry where you see an opportunity and can put together a network and scale it based on subscriber growth and your own private capital capacity, he said. Now there are more hoops to jump through to earn a seat at the table. So this does kind of, again, make it more difficult on these smaller WISPs that don't have all the resources and, again, maybe can't afford to do the business and also pay for licensed spectrum. Zumwalt concluded, all we can do is provide advice and support for our positions to these federal agencies. NTIA has heard it from us in stereo. So they've been talking about this with them for a while, and it sounds like they've got some other folks engaged in that as well. So Fixed wireless, as I mentioned the other day, I was looking at an FCC report that was showing that fixed wireless has really significantly increased as we've had 5G come out. And this is from the licensed operators like T-Mobile, primarily T-Mobile, Verizon a little bit, AT&T almost none, but it's really T-Mobile that's ticked it up. And actually, I'm sorry, actually Verizon has been as well. Verizon really has been focusing more on that than their fiber deployments. So it's mostly T-Mobile, but Verizon, really not much happening right now with AT&T. But there's a couple of stories here. I saw another one in Fierce here that was saying that fixed wireless wave may break in 2023, even though there's been a big increase from folks like T-Mobile that this, we may start to see this now scale back. Like here it's saying, last year was a tough one for cable, with broadband net additions dropping dramatically, and a shift that was attributed to both lower move activity and competition from fixed wireless access offerings. But it seems the tide could turn back in cable's favor in 2023, at least according to a new forecast from New Street Research. T-Mobile and Verizon appeared poised to deliver strong net additions in Q4 2022. The former that's T-Mobile already announced it added 524,000 fixed wireless subs in the quarter. And while Verizon hasn't yet disclosed its net add numbers, CEO Vestberg recently pointed out its 300,000 plus fixed wireless net additions in Q3 and said we continue a good journey in the fourth quarter. It says here, cable is braced for impact, with Comcast warning on Q3 earnings that it could close the year with negative net additions. But in a new research deck sent to investors, NSR predicted the tidal wave of fixed wireless additions will crest this year and start to recede thereafter. The trick, however, is figuring out exactly when that will happen. The analyst firm laid out three scenarios for how fixed wireless net additions might trend, focusing on Verizon and T-Mobile, given they're currently the dominant players in its space. Its base case assumes Verizon will continue to gain customers, with some coming from T-Mobile and some incremental. I'm not sure why from T-Mobile, but if this happens, NSR said fixed wireless additions will peak in Q2 2023 and fall sharply by Q4. This will make for improved adds at cable in the second half of 2023. The major driver for the deterioration in the business outlook for cable in 2022 will clearly be reversing as we exit 2023. Again, I'm not sure why, unless cable fights back. I know they are, in some cases, fighting back with lower introductory prices on their packages, where they might have fixed wireless competition. But if people are happy with their service, I'm not sure why I could see the decrease in growth just being fewer people wanting to switch. Right now, you've got people that are switching maybe because they're not happy with the service, or you've got people switching, well, not happy with the service, maybe let's say they're getting from a cable operator, or lots of it probably in areas where they maybe only have DSL as a solution, and this is a better choice for them. So I'm not sure why those two things go together in that direction. But then there's another story here. This is in light reading. This is another forecast, but it says the same thing in a sense. So fixed wireless growth curve beginning to bend. Fixed wireless access providers are still capturing broadband subscriber share, but the sector's growth curve is beginning to bend. ISI Evercore found in its analysis of the broadband industry ahead of the coming wave of Q4 2022 financial results. ISI Evercore expects U.S. wireless providers, primarily Verizon and T-Mobile, to add about 640,000 residential wireless subs in Q4, nabbing the bulk of broadband industry net adds for a third straight quarter, highlighting a potential leveling out. A gain of 640,000 residential fixed wireless subs would mark a sequential slowdown of 30,000 net adds if the forecast holds up. So they're showing here, Q1 2021, and you can see the big increase. Again, a lot of this was T-Mobile in their 5G mid-band spectrum that they're selling. So you can see your big months here for third quarter and fourth quarter 2022. Verizon also switched from heavily marketing millimeter wave to more mid-band spectrum, so they've been growing that. And again, that's really where they've been focusing on their broadband growth, not on their fiber product. And then you're seeing here they're showing a decrease in that for the first couple of quarters in 2023, and then maybe a tick back up there for some reason. They're forecasting that. So it says that slight quarter-over-quarter decline indicates fixed wireless's adoption curve is shifting from accelerating to linear. But the analysts also estimated that fixed wireless captured the bulk of 2022 residential broadband subscriber growth, tacking on nearly 2.3 million subs and boosting fixed wireless share of the home broadband market by 200 basis points to 3.8%. Fixed wireless share gains, they added, were essentially evenly split between cable and telco. So people would be leaving both the cable and telco competitors. A lot of that telco was, I would imagine, DSL and not necessarily fiber operators. So again, a big part of this is going to be, you're looking at fiber, continuing on, we're going to see fiber growth, but then you've got fixed wireless from these big operators that are now covering lots of territory. So you've got T-Mobile and you've got Verizon. They've got mid-band spectrum. So as they're rolling out, especially T-Mobile kind of nationwide, each of these areas now are considered reliable broadband. It's licensed spectrum, unlike the prior story about WISPA and what they're concerned about with their smaller wireless operators. This is licensed spectrum, and if it's deployed now, it is considered reliable broadband, even if there's no other operator there. Maybe there's DSL and maybe there's, that's it, satellite or something like that. But that then is covered on the map. Now, one question is, according to what internet service providers are now doing, they are uploading their coverage areas based on what it was effective December 2022, the end of the month, December 31st, I think, 2022. So that means if T-Mobile or Verizon adds a new area for fixed wireless, then that should not count as being served if that's the only service there, because, again, they're not supposed to overlay their coverage area unless that was effective as of December 31st, 2022. But anything that was prior to that, all of these big additions that they made in 2022, that all is now covered on the map. It should be, and that should not be eligible for BEAD funds for somebody, for example, for a fiber provider to come in there. Whereas these unlicensed operators that could be providing very similar speeds, let's say they're unlicensed CBRS, so that's that's fixed wireless using unlicensed spectrum, but it's mid-band spectrum, CBRS, mid-band spectrum. It could be just as fast as something maybe that T-Mobile is offering, but it's unlicensed, and it would not count as reliable broadband service, being completely unlicensed, and that would be off the map. And if there's no other competitor there, then that would be an area considered unserved. So let's see what the FCC does with any deployments that are going to happen between now and, let's say, May, when the map comes out, because there could be fiber deployments and there could be fixed wireless deployments. Now, fiber deployments are going to take a lot longer, but a fixed wireless deployment, they can turn that up a lot faster. So you could have big swaths of area that are covered with licensed fixed wireless spectrum between now and the time the map comes out. So I'm assuming that's still going to be off of the map and be available as unserved. I'll see, Conway fan, an issue I've heard anyone talk about, haven't heard anyone talk about, is with fixed wireless serviceability to areas with a lot of trees, such as Appalachia. Many here can't get fixed wireless because of trees. Yeah, and yeah, it's true. You need a pretty good line of sight. This mid-band spectrum is much more forgiving, 5G, much more forgiving than millimeter wave, which can't go through trees. But you're right, you do need pretty good line of sight on a lot of these higher speed fixed wireless to do that. And especially Appalachia, if you got pine trees, that's particularly a problem, because you've got pine needles, and when it rains, the water kind of hangs out on those pine needles, and that the distance and the water seems to be at a just the right distance to really interfere with the wireless signals if you've got, let's say, some moist pine trees. So that is an issue. So yeah, satellite like Starlink, similar. I guess the difference with Starlink, if you've got fixed wireless, you've got a tower out there, and a lot of times kind of hard to get over those trees, where if you've got a shot of the sky with satellite and you've got an antenna, it can track the constellation above you as long as you got a pretty good shot of the sky. There's a antenna in there that kind of moves with the satellite, and you can get some service. That you can't obviously be completely covered. If your house is in a very wooded area, that could be a problem. But if you've got a shot of the sky, it is possible. But again, Starlink being considered, or any satellite service, is not considered reliable broadband service. So it does not count as served, even though Starlink has got a constellation over a good portion of the United States. Those areas, it doesn't matter as far as the map goes. They're not considered served because satellite is not considered reliable broadband service. So All right, well, fixed wireless, it's a big player now. 5G service, again, from T-Mobile, Verizon, AT&T, if they get more spectrum, they're going to jump into this big time as well. So again, the question I have is how much more impact is that going to have as far as the broadband map, being that internet service providers that are uploading their availability data right now are supposed to be making that as it was as of December 31st. So anything moving forward should not count for this upcoming broadband map. Thanks for joining me. I appreciate it. If you are an internet service provider and need assistance with anything, make sure that you check us out. We put our phone number and website up there. We are a provider of managed broadband services and diagnostics. We help hundreds of ISPs improve their broadband service with diagnostics, with outsourced help desk services, with provisioning, with CALIA, with IPv4 conservation. Cybersecurity is a new thing we're bringing on, and that's going to be important when it comes to BEAD, because you have to have, all the subgrantees have to have good cybersecurity plans in place, and we're going to be introducing a product here in just the next couple of weeks on that. So check us out. You see our phone number there, our website, and our email address. So reach out to us. If you're not subscribed, click the subscribe button, click the bell to be notified. If you like this, give me a like on the video. I'd appreciate it. Thanks a lot, and I'll see you next time for Broadband Deployment News. Take care.